Good evening, I'm John Carter. Welcome to Poland Daily. Matteo Salvini, Italy's Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Interior, proposed the creation of a political axis between Rome and Warsaw, following today's talks in Warsaw with the leader of Law and Justice, Jarosław Kaczyński. A coalition of political groups will be built around this initiative, the aim of which is to restore the identity of Europe and return to the roots of the European Union.
Matteo Salvini is visiting Poland at the invitation of the Minister of Internal Affairs, Joachim Brudziński. At the first meeting at the headquarters of the Ministry of Interior and Administration, the Italian guest appeared in a jacket with the inscription Police in Italian. Both politicians took part in a joint press conference. In Europe, the Franco-German axis has been dominating for years. We are aiming for a new balance, new energy, and in this sense, Poland and Italy will be the players of the new European spring, the renaissance of the revival of true European values. Europe must return to its identity, its roots. And I would like to end with an anecdote and quote the words of the Prime Minister, that he may worry that there are many issues in which there are no differences of views, and that may be disturbing, because what is worth mentioning, the difference of views is the essence of democracy. If any differences appear in the future, we will solve them together within the framework of the European Union. After a joint statement, the ministers, along with Senator Anna Maria Anders, laid wreaths at the tomb of the unknown soldier. During the ceremony, a small group of demonstrators were waiting for Salvini and shouted slurs at him. After 3 p.m., the Italian politician met with the Law and Justice chairman, Jarosław Kaczyński. The talks focused on the political cooperation of both groups, including the context of the upcoming European Parliament elections. Matteo Salvini is currently the most popular politician in Italy, with a more than 50% approval rate, and his Northern League is the strongest party in the country. Elections to enter the European Parliament will take place at the end of May. Italy is Poland's third largest trade partner, and around 100 years ago, Italy became the first country to recognize Poland's independence.
The salary of one of the National Bank of Poland's executives remains unknown. Adam Glapiński, the president of the Polish Central Bank, declared today that he will not be opposed to the publishing of the bank's employees' salaries, provided the Parliament draws up an adequate piece of legislation to enable it.
According to media reports, Martyna Wojciechowska, Chief of Communication and Promotions Department, may earn as much as 65,000 Polish zloty per month, calculated from her financial declarations. However, during today's press conference, Ewa Raczko, the Deputy Staff Director at the National Bank of Poland, said that none of the bank's executives earn that much, but she would not disclose the earnings of Wojciechowska. I cannot disclose the earning of Mrs. Wojciechowska. I provided the average salary of all executives. The average salary of an executive mentioned by Ewa Raczko was around 36,000 a month. However, that average may in reality be much higher. This press conference was an absolute joke. Providing average salaries from last year's financial declarations is like saying that if people have 2 legs and dogs have 4, then on average they have 3 legs. I would like to mention one little statistic. There is an anecdote saying that a professor of statistics once drowned in a lake which was 10 centimeters deep, on average. Today's conference was supposed to end the speculation regarding the alleged exorbitant salary of the Chief of Communication and Promotions of the National Bank of Poland. As it turned out, just the opposite occurred.
The US ambassador to Poland, Georgette Mosbacher, has recently taken a very firm stance in defence of the interests of American companies based in Poland, although she doesn't seem to pay much attention to diplomatic protocol in the process as she interferes in Poland's internal affairs.
Defending the television station TVN and sending a letter to the Ministry of Health concerning American medicines are just a few examples of Georgette Mosbacher's interference in Poland's internal affairs. The US ambassador pressed on the Polish Minister of Infrastructure in a similar vein. In November last year, Andrzej Adamczyk received a letter in which Mosbacher demanded the revoking of the regulations, which in practice prevent American Uber from operating in Poland. In the note, she also threatened the freezing of several American investments documents in Poland if her request wasn't granted.
To, że ambasador Stanów Zjednoczonych
Ms. Mosbacher has the right to say that she will represent the interests of American companies, but the fact that our government is so eager to fulfill her every wish is unacceptable.
polski rząd, polska władza.
Ja nie czytałem tego listu, więc jakby nie znam jego
I
treści.
don't know the exact content of the letter, I haven't read it, but it's quite typical for ambassadors to help out companies from their own country if they ask for it. Our ambassadors do the same. As I understand, Ms. Mosbacher does precisely that.
W odniesieniu do firm amerykańskich.
Pani ambasador mogła...
Ms. Ambassador could have given her comments verbally or via the so-called non-paper, which is like a written opinion on some matters, but without an official signature. It's quite popular in diplomacy. Instead, she wrote an official letter with a signature, and that makes it a more serious case. It's a message saying, I demand and I'm expecting results, and that could cause some backlash whether she was right on this or not. It would be better if Ms. Mosbacher gave her standpoint verbally or via non-paper, but also if Polish officials didn't reveal such comments, since it's a confidential matter by nature and it should remain so.
Dobra stosunków polsko-amerykańskich zapewne byłoby lepiej.
The letter from the US ambassador was most likely ineffective nonetheless. The spokesperson for the Ministry of Infrastructure announced that the project of the bill has already left the ministry and is now being worked on by the Permanent Committee of the Council of Ministers. Subsequently, Uber might soon disappear from Polish streets, as it already has in several other countries.
W kilku innych krajach Europy.
Georgette Mosbacher is not the only American taking an aggressive stance in recent times. The President Donald Trump gave a very strong statement on television, trying to convince the American people about the necessity for building a wall at the Mexican border. Trump argues that it is essential to stop the flow of illegal immigrants, drugs and criminals. The Democrats, however, are strongly opposed to the idea, causing a budget crisis in Congress. And finally, the most hotly debated topic on the internet today in Poland are wild boars. Approximately 1/3 of Poland's territory is covered by forests, which are home to over 300,000 wild boars. Boars feed on the crops, causing a loss running into millions to farmers. Moreover, the animals carry African swine fever, leading to even greater losses to the pork industry. Polish authorities have decided to reduce the number of wild boars by 200,000. And environmentalists responded by launching a campaign to defend the animals.
Just a few years ago, Polish farmers reared 11 million pigs. There has been a 4 million drop in numbers due to African swine fever. Farming pigs is prohibited in the regions contaminated by the virus. Cleaning up requires wholesale reduction of the livestock. Areas with ASF cannot export pork products. Since wild hogs are transferring the virus, the most sensible procedure is to trim the size of wild animals' herds. The environmentalists are opposed to the proposal. What is planned is a mass shooting of wild boars. In fact, the entire Polish population is going to be exterminated. There is no scientific approbation to this. The official reason is to fight the ASF virus, but the scientists unequivocally say that it does not make sense and is just wrong. It is unjustified to talk about numbers that have appeared in the media. All we are trying to do is coordinate the action to hunt at the same time in the area that will isolate the parts of the country infected by the ASF disease from the uninfected part. The massive hunt for wild boars is due to start on January 12 and last till the end of February. Meanwhile, the opponents look set to change their Facebook avatars to a wild boar and perhaps even post "Je suis wild boar." In 2016 and 2017, Germany killed over 800,000 wild boar.
Thank you very much for joining me here this evening at Poland Daily. Stay tuned after the break for the weather, and then after that join me for the business, and that's followed by the culture, history and travel.
I'm Aleksandra Zarzycka and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Let's see the forecast for tonight. A quite snowy night as large parts of the country. Some rain is expected in Szczecin, Zielona Góra and Poznań. A maximum 4 degrees in Koszalin and a minimum -4 degrees in Lublin and Rzeszów. Now over to tomorrow. It will be a mixed bag with snow across the country, but also moments when the sun will peek through the clouds. The most sunlight will appear in the northwest. The temperature will range from -8 degrees in Białystok to 3 along the Baltic coast. Let's see the forecast for the following 3 days. Another day will snowfall all over Poland, a maximum 5 degrees in northwest and a minimum -4 degrees in southeast. More rain is expected on Saturday, but with slightly higher temperatures, hovering around 0 to 5 degrees. And on Sunday, rain with snow is expected all over Poland. The temperatures will range from 1 to 6 degrees. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Welcome to Poland Daily Business Edition. Tonight our guest is Dr. Adam Czyżewski of PKN Orlen, Chief Economist of the company. Sir, welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning.
Let's say a few words about the new energy. The Polish electricity market is very much harmed by the regulation regarding the CO2 emission, and some say that this pressure is only going to be bigger. So what the country like Poland, that is based on coal, should do in such condition?
I mean, that's true, and we also share this opinion that the situation will be tougher for hard coal-based energy because of rising costs of emissions of CO2, and this is something which, if one looks long term, is inevitable because according to knowledge the world has to contain emissions. So when future is uncertain, one thing, to my opinion, is certain, that we will live in the world when the cost of CO2 emissions are higher. Will be higher and higher. So what Poland should do? I mean, Poland should divert from coal, slowly but surely. And nobody, I think, expects of us that we, from day to day, we will abandon our coal and we will, go to different energy sources. But we should, in our energy policy, long-term energy policy, show a transition from coal. Why we stick to coal? Because this is our local resource, yes? But when we take wind or solar, it's also local, so it doesn't hamper energy security.
Right. The problem with solar is that we don't have too much of it. The wind, it may be okay, but on the Baltic Sea, and the question if there is enough place to put the turbines and get enough juice from it to power our economy, which is incidentally based on south of the country. So again, it's over 500 kilometers of the energy line to deliver to the final customer.
Yeah, but there are solutions which, for example, distributed power generation, when household can generate power and they can be active player on the market. There are technologies which can combine, small units, which each unit may combine solar, wind, thermal energy, and build a virtual power plants. So, and nobody expects from us that we will go with coal to zero, because in the future probably, because there's a lot of coal in the world, and I haven't seen any scenario, long-term scenario, even the scenario published by International Energy Agency, which are so-called, climate scenarios. In these scenarios, there is a power from coal, but there is a hope that there will be technologies which will, capture CO2 from emissions, and then, this coal would be greener. So we should simply present a long-term strategy how to get out of coal by simply building in other blocks, in other energy mix.
You mentioned the thing that is very rarely mentioned in Poland, the CO2 sequestration facilities that at least I'm aware of two such plants, one in Canada, another in Switzerland, built and being operated. Maybe this is the solution to get out from this loop that European Union is putting on us. Just put 10 plants like that in Poland and tell them, you know, we are basically neutral.
Yeah, that is a solution, but now it's a costly solution. Years ago, our PGE power plant in Bełchatów voluntarily wanted to test such a solution, but it happened. We realized that it would be very, very costly, and actually, regulations in the EU are such that in countries which produce this CCS equipment, you can capture carbon dioxide, but the problem is where to store it, because no country wants to store it.
There are actually two kinds of equipment. One is storing the captured CO2 underneath, and another is sort of bottling it and selling on the market, thus sort of balancing the expensive cost of the sequestration. Maybe put it in the market. This is the solution.
Yeah, this is the solution. That actually now these technologies, they used to be called CCS, carbon capture and storage. They are called carbon capture, storage and use. So there is a lot of potential use of CO2, and I'm pretty sure that we will have proper technologies which will help us to
Did you try this in Poland?
Actually, I'm not sure about that. I know that whether we try it, we certainly didn't try it in PKN, but in universities, in mining university in Katowice, I know that there are attempts to use carbon to push out methane from shell formation, which would potentially help us to develop our shell.
So that sounds
fields.
like a holy grail. You take out from the earth the valuable thing like methane, you use it commercially, and instead you put down the CO2.
Yeah, because if you use capture, and I mean methane also produces while burning CO2. So, but technologies say that capturing CO2 from gas is easier than from solid materials.
But anyway, we will have to adjust and do something with the CO2 emission, because otherwise our energy will become too expensive, harming our export and competitivity in the world market.
Yeah, and there are programs, even in EU, devoted, financial programs for financing transfer from carbon-based energy to other energy sources. So there is a financial support. Also, financial sector now is more willing to finance carbon projects, but those which will transform carbon energy into another transition from carbon to another type of energy, because more and more banks and financial institutions now simply refuse financing investments in carbon power plants.
So the shortest solution for the CO2 emission problem is what?
The shortest is to have a strategy how to, long-term strategy, how to decarbonize economy. And then, if there is such a strategy, then everybody knows what to do. Research, science, applied research, financial institution, etc., because we have a clear path what to do. The worst thing is, wait and see what happens, because we know what's going to happen. We will pay more and more for our electricity.
And this position of the champion of the world in economic term may be harmed. Sir, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
We don't have easy solutions, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get one sooner or later. Mr. Adam Czyżewski, PhD and Chief Economist of PKN Orlen, was our guest tonight, and that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
I'm Aleksandra Zarzycka and welcome back to Poland Daily Weather. Let's see the forecast for tomorrow. It will be a mixed bag with snow across the country, but also moments when the sun will peek through the clouds. The most sunlight will appear in the northwest. The temperature will range from -8 degrees in Białystok to 3 along the Baltic coast. Let's take a look at tomorrow's forecast for the continent. Warmer weather down south with 10 degrees in Rome and Madrid and 14 in Lisbon. The coldest capital city on the continent will be Minsk with -9 degrees, while Athens will continue to be the hottest with a pleasant 16 degrees and a beautiful sunny weather. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
The main goal of the ensemble is to cultivate national traditions and the glory of the Polish Army through various means of artistic expression: music, dance, singing, and the word. The ensemble has been showing the richness of Polish culture and other foreign countries for several decades, cementing it in military and civilian environments in Poland and abroad. The representative artistic ensemble of the Polish Armed Forces refers to the great national patriotic tradition which developed in the spirit of Christianity. The repertoire of sacred music is composed of religious works, from the Bogu Rodzica to church masses and songs. Artists in uniforms also appear in churches, taking part in various national and religious ceremonies. The ensemble works with great impetus, constantly expanding the repertoire. As a military institution, it recognizes concerts devoted to the history and traditions of the Polish Army as its basic task. Few countries have as rich history with armed battles and the tradition of colors, weapons, and arms. The artistic concerts and performances presented both in the country and abroad are welcomed with applause, appreciating the professionalism, talent, and elegance of artists. In addition to old war and military songs, there are new tunes, including pop music, that are also found in the programs. Presidents, prime ministers, crowned heads, and hierarchs of the church from around the world have repeatedly recognized the band members' significant talent.
Chryste Dość trudno jest określić.
It is hard to establish the exact date of formation of the representative artistic band of the Polish army. I think that the first theatre groups and music bands were established at the time of formation of the independent Polish state and Polish armed forces. Their main duty was to make soldiers' time between the battles more pleasant. On occasion, time was given to prepare theatre spectacles and music performances for soldiers for no other reason than just for them to watch. The representative artistic band of the Polish army became a tradition in soldiers' theatres around the interwar period and during the Second World War. The Polish army fighting in the West under the command of General Kościuszko had their own soldiers' theatre, where Ryszard Hanin and Jan Świderski began their acting career. General Władysław Andys's army also had one where the main star was the first performer of the Red Poppies at Monte Cassino, Henryk Wars, and of course General Andys's wife, Renata Bogdańska. The after-war period is very hard to describe. At that time, the band of songs and dance of the Polish army, later called Central Artistic Band of the Polish Army, gave performances. Although we cannot mention here the Polish People's Republic times when they talk about this band, the same goes with the comparison of today's Polish army to the one from the times of Polish People's Republic. So that is why we cannot compare Central Artistic Band of the Polish Army to today's representative artistic band of the Polish Army. The repertoire was more soldierly at the very beginning. The songs created at the time of war were describing the reality of the time. They were describing the fight for independence, usually with a pinch of salt. Among songs creators were not only Gwiszcz, Szul, but also Wieniawa and Długoszowski. Eventually, the need for creating something different increased. A good example here would be the March of the 1st Brigade, which is one of our band's main pieces that we play. Our band wanted to satisfy the creators of every kind of events, so religious, national. During the religious celebrations, we had to give a sacral nature performances. During Christmas, we sing Christmas carols with pleasure. Speaking about Christmas, it is worth remembering that Poland has more Christmas carols than any other country. A musicologist who specializes in these kinds of songs found over 500 different titles. It surely is a very impressive number, it's hard to believe. We know that Bogurodzica, in English Mother of God, is the oldest Polish hymn. The oldest Polish Christmas carol, Zdráv bądź królu anielski, in English God be blessed, was created in the first half of the 15th century, 1424 to be exact. The best period for the Polish Christmas carols was the 17th and 18th century, an era of Polish nobility. The majority of them were created then. An example of this, Bóg się rodzi, English for God is born, written by Franciszek Karpiński. He was the most famous artist, along with Witold Lutosławski. I find diverse topics most interesting. Even if the repertoire is the same at 3 different performances, they still differ because of different audience and their different perception. But let's focus on repertoire, starting with Mother of God through to pieces connected with the time of fighting for our independence, and then the Second World War songs. But then we have all the kinds of music, the sacral music, orchestral music, opera, operetta, and the pop music. We have all these types of music in our repertoire.
I nawet trudno w to uwierzyć.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Warsaw Royal Castle, an estate that served as a residence for king and monarchs of Poland for centuries. Follow me and my guests as we unravel the story and history of this amazing place on Poland Daily History. As the last king of the Jagiellonian dynasty, Sigismund II Augustus died without an heir in 1572. The Polish nobility came up with a new method of electing kings. The Convocation Parliament of 1573 decided also on new measures which gave them even more influence over the monarch. Poland had united with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania in the Union of Lublin 4 years earlier, meaning that the two entities formed Europe's largest democratic organism at the time. Next up, we will speak with Marcin Skalski-Truskolaski, a historian and expert on heraldry, genealogy, and everything relating to the Polish nobility. To illustrate the spirit of the time, he is dressed as a Polish nobleman of the era. During the 16th century, the role of the Polish parliament has a little bit of shift in what it was doing because now they're required to elect a new king. How does that fare into the existing parliamentary system, and what are the dynamics when it comes to that?
W XVI wieku następuje wygaśnięcie dynastii jagiellońskiej.
The Jagiellonian dynasty comes to an end in the 16th century. The last king of the Jagiellonian dynasty on the throne, Sigismund Augustus, dies. There is an interregnum. Even though the Jagiellons were chosen in a sort of elections, it was still the continuation of a dynasty. In the system of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, there was no such rule, allowing a dying monarch to hand the state over to another dynasty in his testament.
Umierający monarcha mógł zapisać w testamencie.
Here, it was the citizens, meaning the nobility, that made the decisive decision. With the royal dynasty of Jagiellons having died out in 1573, the so-called Convocation Parliament convenes. It is decided that the MPs will use majority voting to elect a new king, the first elections. In many regards, this is thanks to Jan Zamoyski, who can be considered to be the father of this system, later known as the nobility's democracy. The Convocation Parliament was the first time where all the representatives of nobility from Poland and Lithuania were able to choose a new king in direct elections. Every nobleman who could show up at the so-called electoral field where the elections were taking place could vote for one of the candidates. In the first elections, French Prince Henri de Valois stood against Austrian Archduke Ernest Habsburg. The French prince won this first election, the first free elections in Poland, a democratic vote for a monarch. This was something unheard of in Europe. On one hand, a ruler was chosen, just like a president is elected now by anyone eligible to vote, and this is indirect election by everyone with the right to vote.
Wybierano władcę, tak jak dzisiaj wybiera się prezydenta.
It is important to note that the basic rights and privileges in Poland allowed any member of the Polish and Lithuanian nobility to become a king. However, in practice, elections were big league politics, and important, powerful candidates were elected. In result, the nobleman elected became something between a king who is anointed by God, who is a deacon, and something of a president-like figure democratically elected by the nobility. A very important decision of the Convocation Parliament is the adoption of the Henrysian Articles and the Pacta Conventa, which secure that the electorate, the nobility that is, get a guarantee that previous rights given to them cannot be taken away by the new king. One can see this as a way of making sure the execution of a particular political program and abidance of the laws enacted. If the king doesn't abide by these laws, the nobility have the right to cast him aside. If he doesn't follow the law and doesn't go through with his electoral obligations, they have the right to impeach him. This is a very important meaning, and as we know, the king elected at the Convocation Parliament, the French Prince Henri de Valois, couldn't take the pressure placed on him by our democracy and ran away from Poland, so we had to have new elections, very successful ones at that.
Henryk Walezy nie wytrzymał tej presji demokracji, po prostu z Polski uciekł, także musieliśmy robić nową elekcję, bardzo zresztą udaną.
So the nobilities in the country has the right to declare confederacy, which is push back against the king. And I was wondering, how did that look like, and what are the details of said confederacy?
Tak, więc tutaj mamy właściwie pojęcie konfederacji i rokoszu, bo przyjęło się mówić, że
Here we have the concept of the confederacy and a rokosz. A confederacy organized against the king without his approval was a rokosz, an illegal rebellion by the nobility. The confederacy is linked to an interregnum period. When there was no king, there was a so-called confederate parliament in which a majority vote rule was in place. Confederacies had an important role during times of political uncertainty or during the collapse of royal power. For example, during the Swedish deluge, A confederacy was formed when the king was forced to leave the borders of the republic. At one point, King John II Casimir Vaza was forced to take refuge in Silesia, and then confederacies formed in Poland to fight on the side of King John II Casimir Vaza to get back his authority.
się w pewnym momencie na Śląsku. W Polsce powstawały konfederacje, które walczyły po stronie króla.
A Rokosz was a not completely legal gathering of nobility against the king's rule, such as the Rokosz in Zebrzdowice against King Sigismund III Vaza's outbursts of absolutist rule. That was the most famous Rokosz to take place during Sigismund III's rule, and it was connected to the famous Inquisition Parliament, during which a legal court case was actually pursued against the king. This was something extraordinary in the European context. It would be unimaginable in other countries that a king could be sentenced in a procedure that we today would probably call an impeachment. So this was the way in which a confederacy or a Rokosz would work, and these were without a doubt two very important features of the Polish parliamentary system.
Konfederacja i Rokosz to tak funkcjonowało i było to jednym z istotnych elementów polskiego parlamentaryzmu, bardzo ważnym.
The House of Wettin, a German dynasty from Saxony, ascended the Polish throne in 1697 when Augustus II, the Strong, was elected King of Poland by the Polish nobility. It was during his rule that the Silent Parliament took place, an event considered to be the final Russian nail in the coffin of Polish sovereignty. Our guest is Łukasz Jędrzejczak, a historian and longtime guide at the Warsaw Royal Castle.
So as we know, the Swedish dynasty also didn't last forever. After them, followed by their footstep, are the Germans who occupied this residence. And I was wondering if you can tell me more about that.
Po abdykacji Jana Kazimierza w roku 1668
After the abdication of John Casimir Vaza II in 1668, the crown went to Michał I, Michał Korybut, and after this short reign to Jan Sobieski III, the last great warrior monarch. After his death in 1696, during an election, the crown went to the Elector of Saxony, Frederick Augustus, who took the name of Augustus II. Unfortunately, his politics in relation to his neighbors, particularly mixing Poland up in a war with Sweden in a pact with Russia and Denmark, in what is known as the Great Northern War, caused part of Poland to once again be occupied by Sweden, and the castle suffered severely under this occupation.
Druga okupacja szwedzka. Pierwsza była w połowie XVII wieku, ta druga w czasie Wielkiej Wojny Północnej straszliwie odcisnęła piętno na zamku.
This was the second Swedish occupation. The first, the so-called deluge, happened midway through the 17th century. The second, because of the Great Northern War, caused the castle to be completely plundered. Floors were ripped out along with marble and gold ornaments. The Swedes completely destroyed the castle. Augustus II and his son Augustus III tried to pull the castle out of the ruins. They built an additional wing in the direction of the old town, the sixth and last wing of the castle. After the renewal of the castle, they gave it a beautiful new facade from the side of the Vistula River, built in a late Baroque and Rococo style. This facade was recreated a few years ago, and it now looks like it originally did in the 18th century. They also founded the castle gardens, which we can admire today as they are currently also being recreated.
Dzisiaj możemy podziwiać, które są również w tej chwili odnawiane.
Can you talk briefly to our audience about the Silent Parliament and how much after the event does the Polish monarchs and elites still retain their sovereignty?
The Swedes organized certain pacts with parts of the Polish nobility against King Augustus II during the Great Northern War, and the dispute between the king and the nobility went on until the year 1717, until at the Silent Sejm, which only went on for one day, there was a reconciliation, a so-called pacification parliament, to reconcile the nobility with the king. It was also established that the Polish army would be made up of no more than 24,000 soldiers. soldiers. In comparison, Russia or Austria had armies numbering more than 100,000 men. It was a parliament that was supposed to underline the great influence the mobility has on the authorities, in turn weakening the political position of the king. The king reigned, but had no influence on how the Polish Republic was ruled after the Silent Sejm. Where does this session of parliament get its name from? None of the MPs were allowed to speak, in fear that one of them would cast his veto, which would lead to the parliament being concluded. This was a unique prerogative of Polish MPs, also known as the liberum veto. The liberum veto was overused, particularly in the 18th century, when the parliament constantly went out of session and nothing could be decided upon.
Bez podjęcia uchwał.
So the silent parliament, as I understand, is under heavy influence of the foreign powers. Can you elaborate on it?
The Silent Sejm conserved an ill system used in the Polish Republic, a strong freedom for the nobility combined with the corrupt practices and bickering among the most powerful of them, the so-called magnates, the weak position of the king, and let's add to that Russian interests. King Augustus II owed his regaining of the throne to Peter the Great, and indeed, particularly after the 1721 Treaty of Neustadt, when Russia finally defeated Sweden in the Great Northern War and became a European power, the Polish Republic in effect became a protectorate of Russia. The Russians decided how the Polish Republic's internal and external policies would look.
Here at the Warsaw Royal Palace, we learned the history and story of Polish democracy and how the parliamentary system came to be. It later on became an influence to Europe and to the whole world. It is not just a story of the castle, but also the story of Warsaw and the story of Poland. That's it for today. See you next time on Poland Daily History.
Welcome to Poland Daily Travel, where it's tram time. That's right, we're going to be traveling around Warsaw using the extensive tram system. You can go from Belany to Wilanowska, from Praga to Wola, from Marszałkowska and Jana Pawła, the great thoroughfares of the city, all using trams. For a lot of you, that will sound pretty exotic. Extensive tram systems don't exist in many cities around the world. Did you know that trams crisscross Warsaw over 276 kilometers? That's 171 miles. There are 750 pieces of rolling stock, 27 regular lines. It's one of the biggest tram systems in Europe. Tram systems are quite familiar in the cities and towns of the old Soviet bloc. But go to most major cities in the United States, for example, or in Britain, and some other European cities, and you won't find trams. The largest tram system in the world is in Melbourne, Australia, 250 kilometers. The next largest are St. Petersburg, Upper Silesia in Poland, Berlin, Moscow, and Vienna. In Warsaw, it all started with horse trams in 1866. The system grew slowly at the beginning of the 20th century, and between the wars was hampered by the Great Depression. The tram system remained operational throughout the Nazi occupation until the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, after which all the infrastructure was systematically destroyed. During Soviet rule in the 1950s and 60s, the network was extended to newly built districts like Ursunov. There was no metro. There were few cars. The tram system remained the backbone of the transport in the city. Post-1989, the tram system continued to use ancient rolling stock. The metro was the thing. However, since joining the European Union in 2005, the metro system of trams in Warsaw has been extensively renovated with new rolling stock and new tracks. It's a pleasant way to see the city. Let's take a look. It's tram time in Warsaw. They say that Poland is the center of Europe, and if you think about it, when we're standing in Warsaw, we're 1,000 miles from London and we're 1,000 miles from Moscow. So Warsaw is, in a way, right in the middle of Europe.
And actually, if you talk to Lithuanians, they will tell you that Vilnius is the center. So it's somewhere around here. But no doubt, Warsaw is a center of Central Europe anyway. Here we can see some of the distances from on this this plinth here, or this, what is it, Nicholas?
I think plinth is okay.
A plinth?
Plinth.
What does that mean? I'm not even sure. Anyway, we can see some of the distances. Helsinki, 945 kilometers. Copenhagen, 647. Oslo, 1,000. That's to the north. And here we can see Athens to the south. This is pointing south. Athens to the south, 1,600 kilometers. Belgrade, 800 kilometers. Rome, 1,300 kilometers. Yeah, all far away. Praga, 500 kilometers. In fact, this is a little known thing. If you go to the westernmost edge of the Czech Republic, Central Europe, it is exactly above Rome if you go straight down. Not a lot of people know that. But do you know anything about trams?
Well, the
Because
tram.
you're talking about I didn't know you were a train spotter.
The
as
tram
well.
is connecting those three stations.
Okay.
So people coming in or going to Vienna would get on a tram and go, if they're connecting further on to Vilnius or to Tiraspol, which is across the river from Brest, Belarus. If they're going either direction, they would take the tram to connect to their next train.
Right.
And hence, and you can't talk about public transportation in a bubble. They're designed to connect with each other.
Do you know what happened in the interbellum period? I mean, I think that means between bells, doesn't it?
Between
What were these
wars.
bells
Between
anyway?
the wars, yes.
Between the wars, yeah.
Between wars?
Yes,
Yeah.
the interwar.
Interbellum? Sounds
Yes.
like a bell. I know what a bell is.
But you don't speak Latin, dear boy.
No, I wasn't allowed to at school. I tried, but they prohibited me. They said, put me in the corner and said, no more Latin for you.
His loss. In any case, well, interbellum is...
Between the wars.
Yes.
Between the wars. Okay, which wars again?
First and second, I imagine. World wars.
Yeah, I think you're right. It says, after World War I, the network developed rapidly.
Of course, this is at the same time when you had electrification coming in around the world, and so I would reckon we're looking at not horse-drawn, but rather electrically operated trams. And so this is the new method of transportation for a city that's growing. Of course, Warsaw had a very dense population at this time, one of the densest in Europe.
You mean they were not intelligent?
No, that means they were very tightly packed in together. And of course, this is the neighborhoods which surrounded what is
Could
today.
they swing a cat?
They could, but it would definitely hit their neighbor. It was,
You're allowed to laugh.
if you look at the area that's around the Palace of Culture, or to the to the west of that, along where the old Jimmy Bradley's.
Well, I don't have my mind-reading cap on right now.
West of the Palace of Culture, across Jana Pavla II, and then on into Wola. That area was very densely populated.
Tovarova, is that what you think?
All the way over to Towarowa, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you go to Ulica Chłodna in Warsaw, you see the old tram tracks there.
That's right. Yeah, you do.
It's time to wander, and there's no better way to wander than with a transportation ticket in your pocket. The city is your oyster, any time of day, any season of the year. For there is one inescapable fact about living in a large city. And Warsaw is a large city, with a metro population approaching 3 million inhabitants. The inescapable fact is that you have to get around. I get around, to coin a phrase, by using the mostly rapid transportation system. I favor trams and metro. I'm just that kind of guy. Hating red lights as I do, the spruce and modern Warsaw Metro is a happy alternative. Cruising in tunnels beneath the overflowing city streets is quite a pleasant experience, popping up from one station to another like a gopher coming out of his hole. Rub your eyes, adjust to the light. Trams are also just dandy. Streetcars fill me with desire. When it comes to travel romance in the city, you might say I have a one-track mind. The trams and metro have it. A streetcar named Desire. The last metro. These are names to conjure with, full of mystery and excitement. When you think about it, travel is something we're doing all the time, whether we're alone or with a friend. whether we're traveling to work or to have a night out, whether it's night or day. We're always traveling in our heads, in our neighborhoods, in our hometowns, from country to country. But you don't have to travel to the far corners of the earth to find adventure. Sometimes it's just right around the corner. So we wander, like Nicholas and I. We wander across the length and breadth of the great capital. The people of the city must move, and move they do.
If you go to Ulica Chłodna in Warsaw, you see the old tram tracks there.
That's right. Yeah, you do.
And those are very famous, especially from the war.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Because those are the tracks that separated the large from the small ghetto. And of course, during the war, during the Second War, if you must ask.
I would. I was going to.
But see, I preempted your
Still waiting for those bells
question.
to go off.
The Nazis would put boards on the sides of the tram so people couldn't see out the window and put them through the ghetto. A gate on one end and a gate on the other end, and they would travel through. Very famous, of course, and then there was the overpass at over the tracks on Chłodna at Ulica Żelazna.
Yeah.
So that's, of course, and those famous old tracks are still there
Try
today.
to keep it light, will you?
Well, any talk about Warsaw history of any sort is ultimately quite macabre, because Warsaw does have a very dark history. You can't talk about Warsaw
said keep it light, and now
without war, but it's not possible.
It's all dark on me here.
I'm sorry, it's not possible.
It's like
Warsaw's
the cloudy
history
day
is,
outside. I feel,
it is depressing in some points.
Well, yeah, I'm starting to get depressed, but I didn't want to.
Well, the good news is,
please,
it's all roses now.
Where's that bell when we need it?
Everything's perfect in Warsaw. There's no pollution. There's no traffic. Everything is green and sunny and flowery.
What?
Exactly.
In Wajinki Park.
Well.
Yeah, that would be the place. Anyway, in 1989, the present situation changed. I call it the year of the great. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened in 1989. The fall of the Berlin Wall. There was the rise of solidarity, the Round Table, the starting of a new government, a whole new sense of the Republic, being born again. Republic of Poland, its great history. But I know 1989 is the year of the great transition.
Ah, good.
That's when, you ought to know this as a tram spotter, when they started thinking about changing over to the new technology. And the metro, they started to think we're going to have a metro, and they started to think of upgrading the I love this phrase, rolling stock.
Well, one of the things they did was that they eliminated what were called the trolley buses at the time, the electric buses. You can still see the suspension poles on the way down to Pruszków, but the transmission lines have been gone for
And I
quite
like
some
nothing better on a trip to Pruszków than to stop and admire each of those posts.
Many have been removed in recent years, I'm sorry. But
I know, I've been looking.
But they were still running in 1994, the trolley buses.
That's about
down
right,
in
yeah.
Ustinov,
Yeah, they don't have them anymore anywhere.
they disappeared.
in Gdynia, they still have them.
There was one that went down to Piaseczno.
There was.
Yeah,